We're here to shine a light on the real science so that you can make informed parenting decisions in the modern world. And the modern world is full of landmines for us parents in terms of the 5 baselines of care that are most critical to the optimal development of our children, both emotionally, psychologically, and physically, of course. And one of those issues that we're going to get into today is bed sharing. One of the 5 baselines of primal parenting is physical touch. And that means the right kinds of physical touch, enough physical affection, the type that develops the social emotional brain in all the right ways, and avoiding the wrong kinds of physical touch, which we have some news on corporal punishment today. We're covering a couple of really important topics that you may be able to help with. Help us out with your stories, particularly pertaining to education law. So about 1 in 5 kids has some type of mental health diagnosis at this point in America. Unfortunately, our kids are being bombarded with environmental and emotional toxicity in our culture that can be masqueraded as science. We're going to bring you the actual science, and so that you can separate culture from real science and make informed decisions. And one of those areas that we want to shine a light on is legislative. Of course, we don't get into political alignments here, and personally can tell you, I think that the two-party system is a psyop to divide and conquer us by the elites who are really in control of the world. And then above that, I believe in the spiritual warfare, and that there are forces that in this world that do use culture and law and many other tools at their disposal to cause pain and suffering. But the good news is we can be informed as parents, and we can be empowered to make the very best decisions for our children's lifestyles and what goes in their mouth, what goes in their mind. So we are all about helping you sort it all out. So we're going to go over a few areas today in this episode regarding family law and education law. We are interested in experts who can speak to attachment science, like how to inform judges in family law to make decisions in their court cases that truly have the best interest of the child at center concerning attachment needs and attachment science and the psychological and emotional damage that can happen when attachment needs are not taken into consideration in terms of custody. So if you are in the legal field and you have some expertise in this area, we would love to consider you as a guest. If you could please email us at Primal Parenting. We'll put the email address in the show notes, and reach out so that we can plan an episode to help out family court judges become educated about the critical importance of attachment health in children. So we don't have, for example, babies in a divorce being separated from their mother if they're breastfeeding, which we really hope that they are, because breastfeeding reduces the rate of SIDS, which we're going to talk about the bed sharing element of the SIDS debate. And not just for the nutrition aspect, but for attachment and for emotional and social health. There's tons of research showing emotional and social benefits as well throughout life for breastfed children. And that's just one example of how sometimes family court can be absolutely devastating for babies and young children. Essentially, children need to have the primary caregiver. They need custody and child support arrangements that keep the attachments to the father and the mother the same as what they're used to. Children do need to co-sleep, and especially in the beginning, and it can take years for them to be ready to sleep on their own. It's completely normal. So family court judges need to be educated about the attachment system and what is biologically, neurobiologically, neuropsychologically normal for human children and for all social mammals. Whether it's the mother or the father that is the primary attachment figure, and both attachment figures need to be considered, and the child's well-being rests firmly on keeping those attachments secure and facilitated. And it's difficult, of course, it's a very difficult when there's a divorce, but sometimes divorce is the best thing for the child as well. And when that happens, we have to make sure that the children are getting access to their attachment figures, and we have to recognize who is the primary attachment figure and who they're used to spending more time with and who they are more attached to in different ways. And of course, there are different roles, and both parents are important. But this is something that is missed tragically in family court, and we've gotten so many reports of devastation and psychological damage done to young children by custody orders and child support orders that are not taking into account the importance of the attachment health of the child. So if you have any information to provide along those lines, please reach out to us if you want to be a guest on the podcast to share your expertise in the area of attachment in family court. How can we educate the judges? Then please do contact us so that we can plan that episode and cover that topic, and maybe even come up with some initiatives that Primal Parenting can work on to help educate the legal system. The other legal aspect that we are looking into at Primal Parenting is education law. So as we know, there's so many children with mental health issues now. 1 in 5 children has mental health diagnosis. We know that autism is now 1 in 36 children, and those are based on old numbers. A lot of experts, top experts in that space, estimate the numbers to be much higher than that. And these kids who are on the spectrum or who have anxiety and depression and other mental health disabilities are often discriminated against in the public school systems. Now, unfortunately, there was a Supreme Court ruling in 2022 that absolutely debilitated any recourse, really, for parents whose children with disabilities were discriminated against and retaliated against in public school districts under Section 504. So the laws are in place, but we're told the Supreme Court ruling has made it so they are really unenforceable, and that leaves children with disabilities incredibly vulnerable to further mental health damage, and leaves school districts with really no accountability when they fail to accommodate these children with disabilities. Special ed is somewhat more clear cut, but when you have children with mental health disabilities that don't have to do with intellect, but have to do with needing accommodations for anxiety, PTSD, which is rampant, unfortunately, because of our culture. Again, so many things in our culture are contributing to that, which we've covered in other episodes, and we'll continue to cover. But this is after the damage is done. We need to take care of these kids at school. They may need safe spaces. They may need attendance accommodations when they are not mentally well enough to attend school. And it can be challenging for school systems to make the necessary accommodations, but this is just where we are as a society. To the school districts, if you don't like it, then go talk to the food manufacturers and go talk to the legislators that allow all the toxins in our environment that are known neurological disruptors and known neurotoxins that are damaging the brains of our children, literally. And that is something that is abundantly clear from the research. And so school districts, we cannot blame these children for having these issues. It doesn't mean they're a snowflake. It doesn't mean that they are just giving you a hard time and making your job difficult. They are hurting inside, and they need accommodations. And the federal laws are in place to give them those protections against discrimination and to afford them a free and appropriate education, and to protect them from retaliation, from being punished for their disabilities. However, this Supreme Court ruling that eliminated the damages that can be recovered in these types of cases has made it so that there isn't much recourse. And we're getting stories from both education law attorneys as well as families who have been financially drained and in litigation for years with these school districts. And we're being told that the bottom line is that the school districts have nothing to lose by failing to accommodate and even retaliating and punishing these kids that have mental health needs. Under Section 504, they can pursue litigation, but the damages are only maybe they get some of their attorney's fees covered years later. Attorney's fees that most families could never even afford to front up front. And some of the families that Primal Parenting has directly spoken with were lucky enough to have $100,000 to front attorney's fees to hold the school district accountable. But as you can imagine, it takes years and their child's education is lost anyway because they age out by the time the lawsuit settles. And this is what we're being told is par for the course for school districts. Even if they litigate, they drag the family through litigation for years and the family wins. They only get attorney's fees. There's no punitive damages for the school district's discrimination and retaliation. And the Supreme Court ruling taking away the punitive damages is really what leaves the school district with no accountability and with the families with no recourse for protecting their child, demanding the appropriate access to free and public education. So if you are an expert in that area, or if you're a family who has been affected by this current legal climate, please reach out to us. We're gathering stories and we're looking at initiatives that we can do at Primal Parenting to help legislatively advocate, or looking at what we can do with these stories in terms of outreach to media to raise awareness of the issue and hopefully get more protections in place for the increasing numbers of children who have mental health disabilities at school. And obviously, this is a big part of the homeschooling movement. A lot of parents just opt out because it's a futile effort to try to get the school system to accommodate and educate their child appropriately. But not every family can homeschool. It's not an option for every family. I encourage parents to homeschool. I think the research is clear that it is the best option if you can swing it, but not every family can. Even if you're reaching out and coming together in small groups in your community and trading days, trading knowledge bases, teach on one day and the other families each take a day. It's wonderful when that can happen. I love those stories. I want to do more content on homeschooling. But for those families who cannot homeschool, who are single family homes or parents, two working parents that can't afford to take off of work to do the job that the public school system is supposed to do for us. We pay for that with our tax dollars. For those families, which are the majority of families, and the needs are increasing, they need advocacy. They really need advocacy in this area because the school districts have nothing to lose. The attorneys are telling us that the school districts will fight to the bitter end, and then the worst case scenario for them is they may have to pay some attorney's fees, which they will use tax dollars for. So they have no accountability. And we really want to shine a light on this issue. Reach out to us by email as well if you would like to share your story. This is something that we're tracking on and planning an episode specifically for in the future. Now let's get to the bed sharing charges. Families are actually being charged with crimes for bed sharing with their babies. Most normal, natural thing since the beginning of time. In my book, Primal Parenting, I cover the scandal that is the science behind the Back to Sleep campaign, the Safe Sleep guidelines by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I deep dive on the science behind that issue. And the bottom line, how it all shakes out, is that the data was manipulated, as we often see in the sciences. If they counted out the deaths of babies who died in their sleep for unknown reasons, or SIDS, and that's all convoluted because of the way they redefined it, but we'll get into that. But if you separate out of the data the cases that were because of falling asleep unintentionally with the baby on a chair or a sofa, which usually happens because the parent is desperately trying to follow the guidelines of putting the baby in the crib and not co-sleeping. And they end up falling asleep because they're so exhausted, because that is a nearly impossible thing to do. The guidelines are not in line with normal biological demands of the little human infant. And then we're told that they're just manipulative and we have to show them who's boss, right? And we have to cry it out, sleep train them. But the truth is that babies expect to be sleeping, just like all social mammals. Babies expect to be sleeping beside a parent in order to feel safe. So when they are separated from the parent, they cry. And when they're put on their back, they cry. That's not a normal position for the baby's body. That's completely foreign and triggers their survival instinct to cry out like, something's wrong here. I'm alone on my back in a crib. And when parents are trying to get them to go to sleep and then transferring them to the crib like they're told to do by the American Academy of Pediatrics, they will often fall asleep in unsafe co-sleeping environments. It's not true co-sleeping, but if you separate out those cases, true co-sleeping, and you separate out the drugs, if there's drugs involved, true co-sleeping is more, what the data showed is it's more protective. And that's not coming from me. That is coming from the science. That's coming from scientists like Dr. James McKenna from Notre Dame, who has devoted his entire career to this topic. And he has studied in depth what he calls breast sleeping. So breastfeeding mothers are more attuned to their infants' breathing and regulation during the night than non-breastfeeding mothers. And they are actually, breastfeeding is protective against SIDS. I cover all the data in my book, and I'll put some points in the show notes. But today we just want to shine a light on this issue of parents being charged with murder. This is unbelievable. It is just so heartbreaking that a family would lose their baby and then be blamed for it and charged with a crime. Just the agony of that. I can't. So Primal Parenting did reach out to one of public defender who was representing one of the parents who was charged with involuntary manslaughter after her little baby daughter died after being put on her stomach. And again, the whole back to sleep, putting the baby on the back, that is also wrought with convoluted data. The instance of SIDS was almost unheard of in the 1960s. The truth is that the Back to Sleep campaign did not lower SIDS deaths. They changed the way that death certificates were coded for babies, and they took away the death caused by the injections. That there's a tremendous amount of data that's censored and hidden that contributes to SIDS, or infant death. They used to have a code for that would go on the death certificate, and that went away. And then by the 1970s, the SIDS rate exploded. The SIDS rate exploded. I will link James McKenna's information below, who is the leading authority on this topic. There's ways that it can become unsafe, but it is not inherently unsafe. It is inherently safer, actually safer. And just breastfeeding alone, which is accommodated by bed sharing, of course, right? They go hand in hand, which is why Dr. James McKenna calls it breast sleeping, because it is the most natural way of sleeping with a baby of a baby sleeping. But you can transition to the crib gradually over time in gentle ways, but you cannot expect the baby just to go from the womb into a crib. It's ridiculous. You tell me if you've experienced a baby that would just go right into the crib without crying it out, without their cries being ignored, without their signals that something is wrong being suppressed, without the parent having to walk out of the room in and out and do all of these sleep training methods. Please comment and share, because I've never heard of it. Honestly, I've had 2 babies myself, and they would not sleep in a crib. They would not sleep on their backs even. At first, eventually they can transition to the crib slowly and with a lot of support. But bed sharing is our evolutionary norm as social mammals. So we can embrace that in safe ways. Please comment and share this with other families who are making the bed sharing decision, making the co-sleeping decision, and encourage them to look at the resources in the show notes and to really research the real science in this topic, because it is life-changing, both for breastfeeding and for SIDS risk, and for avoiding cry out sleep training, which comes with a whole set of social and emotional risks for the brain development of the child. And that's something that is thoroughly documented and cited in my book and course. Take a listen.
He is waking every hour and I'm like a zombie. Everyone says to sleep train, but I just can't let my baby cry and not go to her. I'm here to tell you that there is a way through. We don't have to sacrifice that optimal brain development that happens when the baby is kept calm. Emotions release biochemicals, and we're finding all from modern neuroscience, all kinds of neurotransmitters associated with emotions that have actual neurological effects. So they affect neurotransmitter receptor sites that are forming during this time, and they affect how the brain structures and the set points of the nervous system actually form.
So you do not have to do cry out sleep training, despite what experts and other books and other parents and culturally informed, not science informed resources tell you. You don't have to cry it out. You don't have to traumatize your baby to get them to sleep. And bed sharing and co-sleeping is a healthy part of that stage. Bed sharing is very conducive to the infant learning to breathe, the brain development that allows us to breathe involuntarily, regularly, and well is still developing in an infant. And by sleeping on the parent's chest and near the parent, their heart rate and their breathing is synchronized, and that is how their neurophysiology learns how to breathe effectively and well and doesn't forget to breathe. And that's something that James McKenna also talks about in depth. It is research supported, and the real science supports co-sleeping. Dr. James McKenna talks about so many observations because he has a whole lab observing mothers sleeping with babies and studying it in depth. And it's proven that mothers have this instinct, especially breastfeeding mothers have this instinct. They know when the baby stops breathing. So if you're feeling that you want to sleep near your baby, even if it's a side attached bed situation, that is also much more tolerable for the baby because they can smell and hear the parent. So they have a bit of that feeling of presence and safety that the proximity brings to them. Even the AAP acknowledges in other guidelines that proximity is safer than having the baby in a separate room in a crib. So at least they're acknowledging that. But safer way is the way that James McKenna and many other scientists. Janine Young is another one I'll link, who's done great research in this topic. Speaking of touch, the touch that is afforded through breastfeeding and co-sleeping. That's one of the baselines of primal parenting, the right kind of touch and none of the wrong kind of touch, which is physical violence, of course. But strangely, in our society, physical violence or spanking, I really do have compassion for parents who have been so enculturated to believe that this is the right thing to do, this is the necessary thing to do. Just try to peel back that enculturation and listen to your heart, listen to your instinct. Intentionally inflicting pain on a child is just mentally, psychologically, one of the worst things for the child to experience, because the parent is the safe place, is the protector, is at first one with the child. Just instinctively and at a physiological, neurological level, infliction of pain is associated with negative emotions, of course. And positive touch or affection is associated with love. Infliction of pain on the nervous system, that interprets to the brain the opposite of love. It just does. It's just nature. It's biology. It's physiology. It's neurobiology. This gets us to the topic of corporal punishment, but it's good news in this area. I found out recently, states actually allow corporal punishment in public schools. 19 states in the United States allow corporal punishment in schools. So even aside from the problem of parents being told that this is a way to discipline their children at home, schools were doing it. At least state laws were allowing for schools to do it. The law gives the school immunity from what would normally be charges of assault and battery. They can't be charged with that. And they did not have to even get the parents' permission. The state law afforded them the ability to inflict physical pain onto other people's children. So we have so far to go in this society in protecting children and dismantling the psyops that cause the mental health crisis in children that we're facing. But Florida has just recently passed a bill that prohibits corporal punishment without parent. So yay, Florida. Hopefully these other states will follow suit. Florida's out of the corporal punishment, and there's probably 18 more states that need to follow suit on this, or at least have the parents' permission. Just the incomprehensible fact that it was allowed without parents' permission. Anyway, I posted it on a community Facebook group, and the vitriol that came at me, the admin wisely decided to delete the entire thread, but there were hundreds of comments from, a lot of them were teachers at the school, attacking me for even pointing out that this was in place and that our schools can do this at any time, and there's no legal recourse. We know from the education discrimination for children with disabilities, discrimination and retaliation, there's problems with recourse there. But in this case, with corporal punishment, they were completely protected from any prosecution at all or civil liability. So thank God that has changed. Thank you to our legislators who made that happen. All you advocates out there, nothing good happens, unfortunately, on its own. So there are people behind this, mental health warriors, heroes for children have made this happen. They have to have the parents' permission now, which that just comes back to, we have to educate the parents that this is not an effective or safe way to discipline children. So if you're surprised by that, let me know. If you have any personal experience, please leave a comment and share within your communities, especially if you are in those states that do still allow corporal punishment, which I can read them here. It's Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Colorado, Georgia does with permission, with parent permission. Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Wyoming do allow corporal punishment in schools. Are you surprised? Studies have shown that spanking is the equivalent of other types of violence in terms of mental health outcomes for children from corporal punishment. And the entire country, many countries, but Ireland, I know specifically, it's a federal law that you can't hit children. And in a lot of the states that I just listed, they have laws against, if you did the same thing to a dog, it would be a crime. You can't do it to a dog, but you can do it to a child, a human child. It's just make it make sense. But at least we have some good news on that front. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying the real science illuminated here. And if this is helpful to you, if it's supportive to your instinct as a parent, please drop us a like. It really helps our channel. And if you want to donate to support the Primal Parenting Initiative, it is part of a 501c3 initiative. So you can help us out financially if you're able by clicking the link in to donate in the show notes. Thank you for joining us, and please drop a comment and share this episode with other parents so that we can all stand up together for what's right and help us protect our nation's children. I'm Angela, and I'll see you next time on the Primal Parenting Podcast.